Hey guys! Today we'll be covering a 2022 drama film called Mr. Malcolm's List. The movie begins with two young best friends, Julia Thistlethwaite and Selena Dalton, promising to write each other as they part ways after graduating from school. Julia goes back to her hometown in London. From the look of it, we realize that Julia is rich and well-connected, but she's equally silly, stupid, and downright mean to her servants. Her search for a husband has led her to Mr. Jeremiah Malcolm, the hottest bachelor in town. The fact that Mr. Malcolm is a target of every lady he meets is a rather burdensome privilege. It means that he's constantly fending off gold diggers. In fact, he has rejected so many ladies in the pursuit of the perfect one that he has already lost count. One afternoon, Julia and Mr. Malcolm go to watch an opera. However, due to their contrasting personalities, the meeting doesn't go as expected. The serious Malcolm doesn't quite vibe with Julia when she flops while opining on a political matter. From his expression, we can see that Mr. Malcolm prefers someone with a brain. Elsewhere, we see that Selena is living in the countryside in Sussex. She is the eldest amongst her siblings and is constantly being pursued by an old hag named Mr. Woodbury. Selena has been rejecting him, but Mr. Woodbury reminds her that he will assist her and her siblings financially if she takes him as her husband. The young lady knows her financial condition, but she still rejects the old man. Back in London, Julia gets a letter from Selena mentioning her latest news about Mr. Woodbury. Julia's personal butler brings her additional letters, and inside one of them, she sees a caricature that depicts a wayward-looking Julia, with Mr. Malcolm saying, "Next." This is when she learns that Mr. Malcolm has rejected her. Julia is heartbroken and full of rage at the same time. Soon enough, the caricature gets distributed all over town and gossip ensues. People start chattering that Julia wasn't pretty or charming enough to land the eligible bachelor. Annoyed, she drives down to Lord Cassidy, her cousin's place, and orders her butler to convey a message to him. She wants Lord Cassidy to take care of the gossip and thus her reputation. Obliging the request, he confronts Mr. Malcolm about his sister. The latter only reasons that she wasn't quite his type, although she has a pretty face. Mr. Malcolm, it seems, has a checklist of 10 attributes that any prospect of his must meet for him to consider marrying her. Julia failed number 4, which is converses in a sensible fashion. When Julia's dim-witted cousin discovers that Malcolm has cooked up a list of the traits he'd like his future wife to have, he immediately visits her and reveals everything. Julia is outraged and calls Mr. Malcolm an arrogant man. Beyond that, though, she finds the whole idea of such a list repugnant. So she sets about getting her revenge by summoning Selena Dalton from the countryside. The plan is to carefully set up Selena to be Mr. Malcolm's perfect mate, and when he falls for her and finally proposes, Selena will turn the tables by revealing that she has a list of her own, whose qualifications he has failed to meet. Lord Cassidy thinks the plan is a little devious, but he doesn't have any choice but to help his cousin. Later, we see Selena arriving in a carriage. After Julia invites her in, she wastes no time explaining the scenario. With the help of Lord Cassidy, she wants to take revenge on Mr. Malcolm, or at least have the chance to buff up her reputation. Selena is apprehensive, but when her best friend keeps on insisting, she reluctantly gives in. In the next scene, Lord Cassidy manages to get his hands on Mr. Malcolm's list, and he prepares Selena accordingly. She learns how to swiftly dance in the ballroom, extends her knowledge by reading political and philosophical books, and is also given a wardrobe change to look sterner and more attractive. One evening, the cousins take Selena with them to an elite party with the hopes of encountering Mr. Malcolm there. As expected, he approaches Selena and the two start chatting. She doesn't know that the man she is talking to is the one she has to deceive, so the conversation goes very deep. From the look of it, Mr. Malcolm is intrigued by Selena. However, the two part ways before formally introducing themselves. Inside the ballroom, Lord Cassidy is determined to introduce Selena to Mr. Malcolm, but he is surprised and equally happy when he learns that the two have already met. Lord Cassidy then gets Selena and formally introduces her to Mr. Malcolm. To everyone's shock, he invites her on a date to the art gallery the next day. In the next scene, we see Selena and Mr. Malcolm in the art gallery exchanging intelligent conversation. The bachelor is clearly taken by Selena's charm and cleverness. Their conversation is interrupted by Captain Henry Ossory, who has just arrived in town. The captain and Selena know each other as she used to work as an aide for his aunt during her final days. After the two share pleasantries, the captain tells Selena that he has something important to say to her, so he will visit her tomorrow. He then greets Mr. Malcolm and takes off. After the date, Selena realizes Mr. Malcolm isn't as arrogant and as evil as Julia had been describing. In fact, she is somewhat attracted to him. She confides this to Julia, but gets mocked for falling right into his trap. She then reminds Selina that their ultimate goal is to humiliate Mr. Malcolm one way. The following day, the two friends are visited by Captain OSSORY at Julia's estate. He is there to escort Selina to a park as he has something important to talk about. Next, the two stroll around the park where the captain initially extends his gratitude to Selina for looking after his widowed aunt. He then adds that in her last letter, OSSORY's aunt wished him to marry Selina. Hearing this, Selina is taken aback, but before she can say anything, they are interrupted by Malcolm, who also happens to be in the park. He asks if Selina wants to attend a ball next week, and the young lady responds that she will be there. Envious, Captain OSSORY interrupts and says that he will be attending as well. He then asks to dance with Selina, to which she gladly agrees. Here, we can clearly see a bit of jealousy in Mr. Malcolm. After her meeting with the captain, Selina joins Julia and Lord Cassidy. The latter reveals that she has to play piano later that evening. Possessing a musical or artistic talent is one of Mr. Malcolm's requirements for a bride. Selina is concerned as she doesn't know how to play the instrument, but fortunately, Julia has something in mind. That night, Mr. Malcolm and Captain OSSORY are invited for dinner by Mrs. Thistlethwaite, Julia's mother. Mr. Malcolm takes this opportunity to test Selina's political opinions. He asks her about her views on the Church Building Act. Julia and her cousin seem worried that Selina won't be able to say a word about such a complex matter. To everybody's surprise, she delivers a strong argument against the act, once again winning Mr. Malcolm's heart. After dinner, she plays piano for everybody. However, we see that Lord Cassidy is actually playing it from the side, while Selina is only pretending. As days pass by, Mr. Malcolm and Selina start getting closer. It is clear that he is beginning to fall in love with her. One day, Julia, her cousin, and Selina are buying tickets for a horse race when they are interrupted by Selina's cousin, Mrs. Covington. She is very chatty and often mocks Julia's maiden name, as it is very long to pronounce. Captain OSSORY and Mr. Malcolm also arrive at the scene and greet the ladies. When asked about Mrs. Covington, Julia lies that she is her distant cousin, not Selina's. This is because Mr. Malcolm doesn't like relatives who are chatty and do not respect others. He then invites Selina for a ride, but she is hesitant about it. Fortunately, Julia intervenes and says that Selina will be more than pleased to accompany Mr. Malcolm. As per the plan, the following day the two go for a ride. But Selina seems a little off after learning that the bachelor would have rejected her as soon as he knew Mrs. Covington was her cousin. She realizes how arrogant and self-absorbed he is. However, she cannot deny the fact that she has also started to fall for him. Before concluding their afternoon, Mr. Malcolm invites Selina to a party that he is hosting at his estate in Kent. He also insists that she bring her parents. Selina is thankful and she gladly accepts the invitation. In the next scene, Selina, her parents, and Julia arrive at Malcolm's grand and lavish estate. They are welcomed by Mr. Malcolm and his mother, Lady Kilbourne. Lady Kilbourne is a woman of class, wealth, and high status. It's written plainly on her face how she feels about the Daltons, especially when she discovers that Selina's mother is from a family she's never heard of before. However, Lady Kilbourne also knows her son and the way he feels. She realizes that he has genuine feelings for Selina, who is a sincere, kind, and thoughtful woman. Later, when their guests are gone, Lady Kilbourne approves of Selina as her son's bride. As Mr. Malcolm and Selina are falling in love, Captain OSSORY starts shifting his attention towards Julia. However, the latter is so involved in trying to get back at Mr. Malcolm that she fails to see what is right in front of her, Captain OSSORY. When her mother notes that the captain would be a suitable match for Julia, she says that there's a class difference between them. Captain OSSORY, despite being a military captain, is not on par with the Thistlethwaite's wealth and status. The scene then cuts to Mr. Malcolm's masquerade ball. Selina dresses up as a moon goddess and looks exquisite as ever. Mr. Malcolm cannot take his eyes off of her and quickly reaches out for a dance. As they enjoy their time together, Julia is concerned that her plan isn't working anymore. She is further angered when her cousin notes that her plan wasn't going to work anyway, as they make a perfect couple. That was the last straw for Julia. So she finally tells the truth to Mr. Malcolm. The bachelor is disgusted and heartbroken at the same time when he learns that Selina is part of Julia's plot. Julia argues that it was Malcolm's fault, as she had to come up with something in order to restore her reputation. Hearing this, Selina learns that her friend was merely using her to get revenge. Hence, she storms away, heartbroken. Later, Julia realizes her mistake and approaches Selina to apologize. The two chat for a while and ultimately reconcile. Julia also stops fighting her feelings for Captain Henry Ossory and openly accepts his affections. Meanwhile, Mr. Malcolm is confronted by his mother about the situation. Although she finds her son arrogant, considering his absurd list he made, she understands that Malcolm knows marriage is for the long term, and it's pertinent that anyone should want to have standards when it comes to choosing a lifelong partner. Ultimately, the list is a guise that hides the walls he's put up, the disappointments and pain he might face should he choose poorly, and the distrust he has of anyone who is possibly looking to marry him for his wealth, and nothing more. She tells him that if he loves Selina, he should pursue her regardless of their class difference or silly misunderstandings. Putting everything aside and admitting his own faults, Mr. Malcolm catches up with Selina before she returns to Sussex to tell her he loves her and asks her to marry him. Selina tearfully accepts, and with no more roadblocks between them, the movie ends with a kiss.